वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुम् असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मामृतङ्गमय ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्ति. To Lord Krishna, the embodiment of bliss, who came to establish dharma and punish the wicked. Let us pray to him to lead us from unreal to real, to lead us from darkness of ignorance to the light of knowledge, to lead us from death to immortality. This prayer is most significant, and this is the most important prayer which can be realized by following the instructions given by Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. Everything God has given to us, only we must act upon. We should act upon. Then only we get. Simply sitting idle, you won't get anything. On the other hand, you become more and more idle, and finally one day you collapse. We were studying Bhagavad Gita chapter 6, the Yoga of Meditation, verse number 32. We were discussing in the last class also. Atmopamyena sarvatra samam pashyati Arjuna sukham va idva dukkham sayogi paramo mataha. He who looks upon the pleasure and pain of all beings as he looks on them in himself is regarded as the highest yogi by me. Lord Krishna has given indications of a perfect yogi, how he would behave. He would be most compassionate being, and his compassion knew no bounds. He embraced the whole humanity because he sees the same God dwelling in all the beings, not simply theoretical conception, but practical realization. This we studied a bit of it in the last class, how Swami Vivekananda was most compassionate, and because of his boundless compassion towards humanity, he took all the trouble to come to America to give the message of Upanishads, most uplifting message, upgrading the human being to the divine level. He took all the trouble to come here without penny, without friends. It is really most terrific thing even to imagine. But he did it because he had realized the divine spirit in all the beings, and he was overwhelmed by his training with Sri Ramakrishna, who made him realize the truth. So Swamiji came to America not as an ordinary preacher or a speaker or a lecturer, but he came as a man of realization. He came to show the glory of realizing the divine truth. That's why when he addressed the parliamentary presence at the first instance, just the beginning, dear sisters and brothers of America, that was enough for the whole audience who knew nothing about Swami Vivekananda. They stood up and gave high applause for 7 minutes, 6 to 7,000 people. They were almost in ecstasy. So, same Swami Vivekananda, after he came back to India, he saw most terrible conditions, people living here, and he was totally moved by the compassion, by seeing the working laborers, their poor conditions, famished body, no food, proper food. He literally wept, and he arranged sumptuous food to be prepared and be given to all of them. And he gave a piece of cloth also to every one of them. Sri Ramakrishna did the same thing when he visited Vaidyanath Dham, that we discussed in the last class. So, turning to the disciple, Swami Vivekananda said, "Look, I found in these people the veritable embodiment of God. Such simplicity, such sincere, guileless love I have seen nowhere else." And later, he addressed the sannyasins of the mutt. He said, "Can you mitigate their misery? Can you mitigate their suffering a little? Otherwise, of what good is the wearing of the Gerva cloth? Sacrifice of everything for the good of others is real sannyas." Seeing the poor people of our country starving for food, a desire comes to my mind to overthrow all ceremonial worship and learning and go around from place to place to serve these poor people and afflicted ones. Such love for suffering humanity had come to the heart of Swami Vivekananda from the teachings of his master Sri Ramakrishna. Seeing God everywhere, and in particular his most dramatic and full expression in human beings, was the main emphasis of the teaching of New Vedanta as propagated by Sri Ramakrishna. Innumerable examples can be cited to highlight this point. For instance, Sri Ramakrishna once remarked, "I wondered, why should be God meditated upon only with eyes closed? He should be seen all around us, in all human beings, even with eyes wide open." One more touching incident is worth accounting from the life of Swami Vivekananda. Once Swamiji was delivering a talk on Vedas to the sannyasins of the mutt. The whole country was in the grip of famine. People were suffering and even dying of hunger. Girish Chandra Ghosh, a close associate of Swami Vivekananda and devotee of Sri Ramakrishna, was listening to the erudite talk, but he felt that such a talk was useless and misplaced, for it did not help mitigate the pangs of hunger of millions of people. Hence, intervening, Girish said, "O Swamiji, would this talk bring peace and solace to this suffering humanity? Can Vedanta and Vedas bring food to the hungry mouths? How I feel for them. What should I do? What can I do?" Listening to the fervent appeal full of pathos and sincere feeling, the broad and most tender heart of Swami Vivekananda melted. As a result, tears rolled down his cheek. Not to embarrass the sannyasins, Swami Vivekananda rushed away to his chamber in great distress. Turning to the group of sannyasins, Girish Babu said, "See how compassionate your Swamiji is. We householders do not much understand Vedas and Upanishads, but we see genuine love for humanity in Swami Vivekananda and hence love him and his Sangha." His heart cried out in silence, and his eyes shed silent tears of sorrow at the suffering of masses. The mighty Jnani in the Swami became the compassionate saint like that Buddha. Bhakti and Jnana must be activated with selfless karma. It must be so. Something must be done for the masses. That was pressing necessity. And thus indeed he resolved. Tears of anguish softened and broadened his heart. And one day he said, "Oh brother, I don't know the meaning of religion. But one thing is sure. Now I feel my heart has broadened and is capable of accommodating and feeling for everyone, be he destitute or a king, healthy or afflicted. I see the same Narayan in poor as well as in fool, in wealthy as well as in wise." That is the most significant characteristic of a yogi who has adopted meditation, which according to Lord Krishna, Swamiji represents in full measure. Verse number 33, Arjuna Uvacha, Yoyam yogastvaya proktaha samyena madhusudana etasyaham na pashyami chanchalatvat sthitim sthiram. Arjuna said, "O Krishna, this yoga of equanimity taught by you, I don't see its steady continuance because of restlessness of the mind. Mind is extremely unsteady." There is an instance in the Gospel. Once a devotee asked Sri Ramakrishna, "Master, why has God put us in the world?" This question is frequently being asked. They keep on asking this future also. Sri Ramakrishna replied, "Well, do you know why God has put us in the world? To perpetuate His creation. It is His will, His Maya. He wants the game to go on, the Leela of the world. He has deluded man with lust and greed." Devotee asked further, "Master, why has He deluded us? Why has He so willed?" Sri Ramakrishna replied, "If but once He should give man a taste of divine joy, the man would not care to lead a worldly life. The creation would come to an end." The grain dealer stores rice in huge bags in his warehouse. Near them he puts some puffed rice in a tray. This is to keep the rats away. The puffed rice tastes sweet to the rats and they nibble at it all night. They don't seek the rice itself. But just think, one seer of rice yields 14 shares of puffed rice. How infinitely superior is the joy of God to the pleasure of lust and gold. To one who thinks of the beauty of God, the beauty of even Rambha, Tilottama of the heavens, appears as but the ashes of a funeral pyre. Devotee asked further, "Sir, Why do we not feel intense restlessness to realize Him? Sri Ramakrishna said, a man does not feel restless for God until all his worldly desires are satisfied. He does not remember the Mother of the Universe until the share of the enjoyment of lust and greed is completed. A child absorbed in play doesn't seek his mother. But after his play is over, he says, Mother, I must go to my mother. Another son was playing with the pigeons, calling to them, come, tea, tea. When he had had enough of play, he began to cry. Then a stranger came and said, come with me, I will take you to your mother. Unhesitatingly, he climbed on the man's shoulders and was off. Under the spell of God's Maya, man forgets his true nature. He forgets that he is heir to the infinite glories of his Father. This divine Maya is made up of 3 gunas, and all 3 are robbers, for they rob man of all his treasures and make him forget his true nature. The 3 gunas are Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. Of these, Sattva alone points the way to God, but even Sattva cannot take a man to God. Then Sri Ramakrishna tells a story. Once a rich man was passing through a forest when 3 robbers surrounded him and robbed him of all his wealth. After snatching all his possessions from him, one of the robbers said, what's the good of keeping the man alive? Kill him. Saying this, he was about to strike their victim with his sword when the second robber interrupted and said, there is no use in killing him. Let us bind him fast and leave him there. Then he won't be able to tell the police. Accordingly, the robbers tied him with a rope, left him and went away. After a while, the third robber returned to the rich man and said, oh, you are badly hurt, aren't you? Come, I am going to release you. The third robber set the man free and led him out of the forest. When they came near the highway, the robber said, follow this road and you will reach your home easily. But you must come with me too, said the man. You have done so much for me. We shall be happy to see you at our home. You can take lunch with us. No, said the robber. It is not possible for me to go there. The police will arrest me. So saying, he left the rich man after pointing out his way. Now the first robber who said, what's the good of keeping the man alive? Kill him, is tamas. The quality of tamas is destroy. The second robber is rajas, which binds a man to the world and entangles him in a variety of activities. He is so busy he can't even think of repeating God's name even once. God's name becomes so dry to him because his mind is fully occupied with full of worldly activities and entanglements. That's the quality of Rajas. Rajas makes him forget God. Sattva alone shows the way to God. It produces virtues like compassion, righteousness and devotion. Again, Sattva is like the last step of the stairs. Next to it is the roof. The Supreme Brahman is man's own abode. One cannot attain the knowledge of Brahman unless one transcends the 3 gunas. Again from Gospel, one devotee of Mahendra, he asked, why does one slip from the path of yoga? Sri Ramakrishna replied, while thinking of God, the aspirant may feel a craving for material enjoyment. It is this craving that makes him slip from the path. In his next life he will be born with spiritual tendencies that he failed to translate into action in his present life. Then Mahendra asked, what is the way? Sri Ramakrishna replied, no salvation is possible for a person as long as he has desire, as long as he hankers for worldly things. It is not good to cherish desires and hankerings. So, it comes to this point, which we should note down very sincerely, seriously. We must give attention to this idea. Fire of craving, always burning you. This fire of craving is consuming the human being. There is a couplet in Sanskrit, Chita ayato chinta ayata bindu matra visheshataha. They take two identical words. There are two identical words. They are identical and they are spelled chitta. Chitta, the heap of the wood that is heaped up in an ordinary way upon which a dead body is kept. That's called chitta. And it is set fire to, so that the cremation takes place. Because the Hindus cremate their dead. So it's called chitta. And if over this chitta one little dot with the tip of your pen is put over the first alphabet C, chi, then the word becomes changed from chitta to chinta. By the mere putting of one little dot, 99% they are identical. That 1% is, if you put a little dot with the tip of your pen, immediately the word becomes quite a different word. Instead of chitta, it becomes chinta. Chinta means sorrow. Sorrow is a fire that can consume a person. So the couplet goes, Chitayato chintayata bindu matra visheshataha. There is only the difference of one little dot between chitta and chinta. But then this dot makes this world far more powerful than the fire that burns the dead body. The fire of the single fire in the cremation ground burns only a dead body. But the fire of sorrow burns away even a living individual. And it consumes. Sorrow consumes a living human being. And so the Urdu couplet says, if you want to overcome sorrow, give up all desire. Chaha gai chinta miti manava viprava jeko kuch na chai. Wahan hai Shahanshah. I don't know Hindi. A desire, get out. I shall always be an emperor of emperors. I will want nothing. I will say, I don't want anything. I am full by myself. I am myself complete, full. Therefore, I laugh at sorrow. Sorrow cannot approach me. And so, if you want one thing, the opposite also will always be with you. The wheel of samsara, which is two spokes of raga dvesh, likes and dislikes, has made everything in this samsara dual. If you want happiness, misery also will come. If you want health, disease also will come. Therefore, you must try to become dvandvatita. You must go beyond this dual states. Free yourself from this involvement, entanglement to this pair of opposites. I neither want this nor want that. The 5th and 6th verses of the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita indicate that path of going beyond the dualities and forever becoming free from this world of pain and psychosis. Death and rebirth, again death. Going from one body into another body, going from another body to another one. Getting entangled in this wheel. Nirmana moha jitsanga dosha. Be without. For that being who is without pride and delusion, mana and moha, free from pride and delusion, and having attained victory over attachment, dosha, the defect of attachment, adhyatma nitya vinivritta kamaha, and well established the like spirit in God, and with all desires, free from desires, and liberated from this dual throng, the pair of opposites like pleasure and pain, happiness and misery. Now here comes a crucial question. It is that abode beyond the moon, beyond the sun, beyond everything, back of the beyond. There is in that abode, there is neither the sun nor moon nor this earthly fire. And it is that eternal abode of mine, having reached which one does not return once again here. Having reached there, one does not come here. That is my supreme abode. To that abode you go. So if you want to go to that abode, be liberated from pride and delusion, be liberated from attachment, rise above dual throng, pleasure and pain, happiness and misery. You left everything. Say, I don't want anything. There is that eternal abode, and that eternal abode is my supreme abode. My supreme abode, attaining which one does not once again return here. So that should be your goal. You should strive for that. You should pray for that. Go beyond everything. Reach the supreme abode, and you will not return once again here to this world of pain and death. Verse number 34. Chanchalam hi mana Krishna pramathi balavad dhridam tasyaham nigraham manye vayoriva sudushkaram. Because the mind indeed is very unsteady, turbulent, powerful and obstinate, O Krishna, I think restraining the mind is as difficult as restraining the wind. The mind ever changes its point of concentration from one object to another. So it is always restless. It is not only restless but also turbulent and impetuous, strong and obstinate. It produces agitation in the body and in the senses. That's why the mind is even more difficult to control than to control the wind. It is said in another scripture, Apyabdhapanan mahatas sumerun mulanapi apivanna sanat sadho vishamas chitta nigrahaha. It means it is very hard indeed to control the mind than drinking the whole ocean, than uprooting the great Sumeru mountain, than eating the fire. Arjuna addresses the Lord as Krishna. It has great significance. What is Krishna? Doshan karshati nivarayati iti Krishnaha. Purusharthan karshati prabhayati iti Krishnaha. The Krishna has got tremendous spiritual meaning. The devotees by themselves are unable to clear off their sins and blemishes which are removed by the Lord, and so he is called Krishna. The devotees by themselves are unable to achieve the supreme goal which the Lord bestows on them, and so he is called Krishna. Here Arjuna is indicating that he is quite unable to control the restless, stubborn mind, but Krishna possesses that power to bring his mind under firm control. By his self-effort alone, Arjuna would not be able to achieve the bliss of Brahman, but which could be obtained by the supreme grace of Krishna. Concentration of mind and the bliss of Brahman are possible through the grace of the Guru. So the spiritual seeker should surrender himself to the Guru. So the relationship between Guru and disciple plays very important role in our spiritual life. So, it means the disciple should follow the instructions given by the Guru carefully, devotedly, sincerely. That clears the way towards perfection. Mind is by nature restless. It remains distracted for many reasons. We must know this nature of the mind, then you can deal with it. Association with the holy will bring it under control. Live in the society of holy people and follow their advice. If you do, you will be saved from much grief and trouble. If your mind does not become absorbed in God, it will be impossible for you to protect yourself from the many temptations of the world. These are the words of Swami Brahmanandaji. You find all his teachings are given in the spiritual teachings. A person asked a question, "Oh Maharaj, my mind is very restless. It becomes difficult to practice japa and meditation. Please tell me how can I be helped?" Raja Maharaj Brahmanandaji said, "Look, wake up early in the morning. Wash yourself and choose a firm seat. Command your mind in this way, O mind, keep still, let no distractions enter. The strength of the intelligent will keep the mind under control. Soon it will become concentrated. Then no distractions will arise. A man can train horses and elephants and bring them under control. Can't he learn to train his own mind?" Well, this is one of the methods of restraining the mind. Be steadfast in your ideal even when the mind is restless. Keep the regularity of your practices under all conditions. The more attached you are to the vanities of the world, the more you are attached to the vanities of the world, the more restless will your mind become. The mind is like a restless child. It wants to run away. You must bring it back again and again and apply it to the meditation of the Lord. Go on this way for 2 or 3 years, and then an inexpressible joy will fill your mind. Once a devotee asked a question to Swami Shivanandaji. "Maharaj, I can hardly pray. My mind is so restless. I find it hard to concentrate at times." Shivanandaji replied, "No, you will have to pray and pray very earnestly. Do not be depressed. Do not be disheartened. Be in a happy mood and pray. He will give you everything, my child, everything you want. There is nothing He will withhold from you. It will not do to be restless. One has to get deeply absorbed in spiritual exercises. One must strengthen one's spiritual attitude in one's own mind. Even such a restless mind can be trained gradually and made to concentrate on God. Don't begin meditating or making japa as soon as you sit down on your seat. First, start with a calm prayer to the Master. The Master is Samadhi incarnate. If you can pray to Him sincerely and think of Him, the mind will become concentrated. Pray thus, O Lord, make my mind calm, fill me with peace. Pray like this for some time. Don't worry, the mind is by nature restless. You will have to study it by the power of the name of the Lord and by prayer. Make the mind one-pointed and practice japa meditation. You will then gradually overcome restlessness. Swami Turiyanandaji said, "Don't be restless. Only the other day you came from Calcutta. If you go now, it will be setting a bad example. Control the mind. Be not controlled by it. Surrender yourself to Him alone. Your everything, your body, mind and soul. O my mind bird, why fly from tree to tree tasting different fruits? Having your eternal nest on one, who can offer you the greatest fruit. Unless one has inner peace and contentment, one will find restlessness and suffering wherever one goes. Raise a wall around your mind by your discrimination. Do not allow the distraction of external circumstances to enter your mind. Know that this is sadhana. You can't find in the world any place after your heart. Learn to turn unfavorable circumstances into favorable ones. The mind is all in all. Your duty for the present, when you have mental unrest, is complete resignation to the will of God. Since your petty will is not being fulfilled, give it up and drift only depending on His divine will. Then you will get peace. One devotee asked a question to Ramakrishna-ji. How can we overcome the restlessness of the mind? Swamiji replied, by fixing it on God. As long as the mind goes out to the world through the senses, it will be restless and it will be weak. The more a mind is restless, the weaker it is. The more it is calm, the stronger it is. Swami Shardananji said, restlessness arises because of the outgoing tendencies of the mind. As the mind becomes more and more indrawn, more and more concentrated, the wild roaming of the mind will cease and you will experience inner joy and ineffable bliss. Conflicting desires arise in the mind. Because of those desires, the mind is constantly lashed into waves. As long as these waves form, the mind is restless. In order to control these waves, which gives rise to thoughts of worldly and distracting nature, one must live a life of self-discipline. Until you have fully grasped the truth of the statement, the world is unsubstantial and illusory as a dream, the restlessness of the mind is bound to recur. Practice and detachment are necessary to bring one-pointedness to the naturally restless and outgoing mind. The means of subjugating the restless mind are vairagya and practice, renunciation and practice. This is written in the Gita. There are no other means. Another Swamiji from Subodhananji said, you complain of restlessness during japa. There is nothing peculiar in your case. Many are in the same predicament. Still, you must never cease from calling on the Lord, and know this for certain, that the Lord's name cuts through all obstacles. So have faith in the Lord's name and keep repeating Lord's name under all circumstances sincerely. Another Swamiji Vijnananji said, why do you make so much of these struggles that are going on in the outside world? Do you think that they will stop? Supposing you gain your immediate end and the present phase of struggle passes away, certainly they will not. Restlessness arises not from these external struggles, but from our own internal hankering and our clinging to the things of the world. Why should you attach so much importance to worldly events and movements? These have been and always will be there. If, for instance, the political independence you are striving for becomes a reality, will that bring an end to all your troubles? Certainly not. As a matter of fact, it is not these external struggles which give rise to mental unrest, but it is our inordinate attachment to worldly things and uncontrollable desire to acquire them that make us restless. In the Gospel, Sri Ramakrishna said to Vijay, well, Shivanath is always in trouble and turmoil. He has to write for magazines and perform many other duties. Worldly duties bring much worry and anxiety along with them. These are Sri Ramakrishna's words. He said, it is narrated in the Bhagavata that the Avadutta had 24 gurus. One of them was a kite. In a certain place the fishermen were catching fish. A kite swooped down and snatched a fish At the sight of the fish, about 1,000 crows chased the kite and made a great noise with their cawing. Whichever way the kite flew with the fish, the crows followed it. The kite flew to the south and the crows followed it there. It flew to the north and still the crows followed after it. The kite went east and west, but with the same result. As the kite began to fly about in confusion, the fish dropped from its mouth. The crows at once left the kite and flew after the fish. Thus relieved of its worries, the kite sat on the branch of a tree and thought, that wretched fish was at the root of all my troubles. I have now got rid of it and therefore I am at peace. The Avaduta learnt this lesson from the kite, that as long as a man has the fish, that is, worldly desires, he must perform actions and consequently suffer from worry, anxiety and restlessness. No sooner does he renounce these desires than his activities fall away and he enjoys peace of soul. But work without any selfish motive is good. It doesn't create any worry. But it is very difficult to be totally unselfish. We may think that our work is selfless, but selfishness comes unknown to us, from no one knows where. But if a man has already undergone great spiritual discipline, then as a result of it, he may be able to do work without any selfish motive. After the vision of God, a man can easily do unselfish work. In most cases, action drops away after the attainment of God. Only a few, like Narad, work to bring light to mankind. So, the culprit has been found out. The culprit for all our sufferings, restlessness of the mind, is desire. Desire to enjoy the pleasures of the world. Desire also is mixed up with it, involves you in some kind of attachment. So that's the way it is. Hold on to God, surrender to Him, follow the teachings of the Guru, keep regular contact with holy people, take spiritual sadhanas seriously, and do them honestly, surrendering yourself to the Divine Lord, then things will be all right. Let us continue next Tuesday. Om Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. Let us offer our salutations to Lord Krishna, the embodiment of bliss, who came to establish dharma and punish the wicked. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.